Hello, my name is Paul Trilsbeek. I'm the head of the Language Archive at the Max Planck Institute for Psycholinguistics in Nijmegen, and my presentation is about potential directions in the data repository landscape. Now, there are many repository solutions out there currently, a few dozens that have quite a healthy user base. So there are open source solutions such as DSpace, Febraury Commons, Dataverse, CCAN, and commercial solutions like Rosetta, Preservica, Archivum, and there are also custom in-house or outsourced developments. Now, in order to adopt a given solution or to migrate from one to the other, that requires a fairly large investment in time and money for most organizations. And there's relatively little standardization in terms of the technical implementation. So there is a certain minimal metadata set called Dublin Core that is supported by quite a few repository systems. Also, there is the protocol for exchange of metadata called OAIS that is supported by quite a number of repository solutions. More recently, the OAI-OR standard and linked data are supported by more and more solutions. And there is also the Baggett specification for storing and transporting archival objects in a standardized way, which is supported by a number of solutions for import and export. Also, there is the Open Archival Information System, the OAIS reference model specification, which is a high-level reference model for the technical and organizational functions of a digital repository originally developed by NASA and others for space data, but it's broadly applicable to any type of repository. It's an ISO standard since 2003, and many repository solutions strive to be compliant to this high-level model. But since it's a high-level model, it doesn't really specify anything about the practical implementation of those components. So it speaks of archival storage and archival information packages, it speaks of ingest functionality, access functionality, and so on. But it doesn't say much about how these need to be implemented. Now, there are two developments that could potentially change the way in which repositories are implemented, and one of those is the Oxford Common File Layout, and the other is the Digital Object Interface Protocol, DOIP. To start with the Oxford Common File Layout, or OCFL, a quote from their website: the OCFL specification describes an application-independent approach to the storage of digital information in a structured, transparent, and predictable manner. And the key term here is obviously application-independent. It's heavily inspired by the Baggett specification and also the MOAB specification for versioning. You could say it's sort of a Baggett with versioning specification designed specifically for long-term storage of digital objects. It sparked a lot of interest in the digital repository community. Version 1 was released last year. It has been in development for about 3 years. And it's currently implemented in Febraury Commons version 6, which is released in an alpha version, and it's on the roadmap of the Invenio RDM repository solution for June of this year. Invenio is developed originally at CERN, and it's the platform that, for example, Zenodo uses. Also, there are Python and Java libraries available for storing data in an OCFL compliant manner. Now, I don't want to go too much into details, but just as an example of what such an OCFL structure on disk may look like in case, for example, of a TIFF image with 2 versions. You have a root directory for the object, then there is a file, the file name of which specifies which version of the OCFL specification was used for storing this object. The inventory I will come back to in a moment, and then for each version of the file there is a folder, so version 1, version 2. In that folder is a content folder, and that content folder contains, in this case, this TIFF image for version 1 and also a newer version, version 2. Then there is this inventory file, which contains the inventory of what this structure contains. So it contains the names as well as checksums for those files, such that you can verify whether the file is still intact. And there's also a checksum file for the inventory itself, such that you can verify that the inventory is still intact. And this is then the same for version 2. This inventory here at the very top is the inventory of the latest version. So this is basically a copy of this version 2 inventory in this case. So that's what OCFL looks like for a single file with 2 versions. Now you can also structure a whole collection or even a whole repository in such an OCFL structure. The DOIP protocol, Digital Object Interface Protocol, a quote from their side, DOIP is a simple but powerful conceptual protocol for software application to interact with services which could be either digital objects or the information systems that manage those digital objects, so repositories basically. It was developed at CNRI in the US, involving, for example, Bob Kahn, who is one of the founding fathers of the internet, you could say, who co-developed the TCP/IP protocol. It's now governed by the Donor Foundation in Switzerland. Version 1 was released in 2009 already. Version 2 came out in 2018. It's a free, non-proprietary and open standard, but as far as I've seen, hasn't gotten much uptake yet in the data repository community. I know of one implementation in a package that's developed at CNRI as well. It's the Corda software. And there's a software development kit available for the Java programming language. Now, DOIP operations on digital objects could be, there is a number of obligatory operations that any system would have to support. So that's the typical CRUD type operation, so create, retrieve, update, or delete a resource. There's also the hello operation to get information about the service that you're contacting. Search needs to be supported, and list operations is an operation that then returns all the supported operations of the system. The DOIP specification assumes that objects have a persistent identifier, so a DOI or a handle, and optionally extended operations can also be defined, but these basic ones then have to be supported by any system that supports DOIP. So in an ideal situation, this would look like the following scheme. So you have a storage layer where your digital objects are stored in an OCFL structure. You could have a number of different repository software solutions that could each read and write from such an OCFL structure. And on the other side, you have a number of tools that talk in the DOIP protocol to the repository system. So for example, you could have an ingest tool to ingest new data into your repository. You could have a dedicated client software, or you could have a presentation layer with search functionality and nice presentations on top of the repositories. And if they all talk this protocol, then basically this middle layer of repositories would be interchangeable. I'm well aware that this is a very idealized situation. In practice, there are all kinds of things that need to be considered as well. For example, different software packages for repositories have different levels of hierarchy that they support. For example, Fedora Commons, you can have unlimited hierarchy in your collections, and in DSpace that is not the case. So things like that would also have to be standardized, and also there has to be an agreement on what minimal metadata is used. But in any case, this is the ideal situation that we might have at some point if these protocols are implemented. Is this the future? Well, obviously I don't know. What I do know is that PARADISEC is currently implementing an OCFL-based repository catalog system. Also at Language Archive, we strive to migrate to Fedora 6 with OCFL support once that the Islandora layer that we use in connection to Fedora supports it. Wide OCFL adoption is certainly going to take a while. It needs a substantial amount of work to implement for most repository systems, and probably needs to be driven by the open source community, with commercial vendors following once there's sufficient demand from customers. DOIP, I think, needs more outreach and lobbying. I've seen some efforts within the Research Data Alliance, but really the repository producers need to be on board, I think, before this can be a success, which currently doesn't seem to be the case yet. I think there's an opportunity to ask questions. If not, you can also reach me by email via the address below. Thank you very much.